Hey there, and welcome to this week's edition of CleanTechnica's news broadcast, where we bring you all the relevant CleanTech news of the week in about 20 to 30 minutes. My name is Hanan, I'm your host, and this week the first thing I want to address is last week's news show, or the absence of it. It has been filmed, and I hope to release it within the next few days. It was delayed first by the live stream from last week, the Tesla investor call, then a 2-day migraine. So it just needs some assembly. But really, this is one of the limitations of having a just one-man team, and it's something that makes our channel announcement even more important. We are starting a Patreon channel. So before I get to the benefits, I just want you to know what our main goal is here, and that is to take the YouTube channel to the next level. You see, besides the news show that we're so heavily focused on right now, we also want to start doing electric vehicle reviews. We want to be able to visit awesome companies like the way we visited the Tesla Fremont factory last year. And to do those things, we need a bit of support, to be able to hire an extra pair of hands to hold a camera on occasion, get someone to do some editing work in emergencies. And a mere $100 a month will already allow us to start doing this on occasion. And so that is our first Patreon goal. So you might be wondering, what do I, as a patron, get in return for basically buying us a cup of coffee once a month? I'm glad you asked, because there are a bunch of cool benefits spread throughout a couple of support tiers. But imagine we visit a cool company, do a cool interview. You'd be able to suggest a question that we should add to the interview, a question we should maybe ask that company while we're there. You'll get behind the scenes views, which will be pretty cool when we go on our next factory tour. Patrons can also suggest video ideas, help us decide what we should do deep dives on. Patrons can suggest news stories that we should cover in the weekly news show. Patrons will also get access to our brand new Discord server, and we're also working on implementing a bunch of other cool benefits like merchandise. But there's also one benefit of a slightly different nature. You would be supporting the CleanTech revolution, because every person CleanTechnica informs about the issues like climate change and the awesome clean technologies that will solve the problem, the closer the world will get to a sustainable future. And you can help support that. If you do decide to support us and our CleanTech mission, thank you. It really means a lot. And now we can get to the news. Tesla improved driving visualization. A lot of Tesla owners had an important complaint about autopilot. Does the vehicle see that car, pedestrian, or semi-truck? And this is something that was mostly solved when Tesla released the digital display of other vehicles around it. Then it improved it further by adding different car shapes, pedestrians, cones, and even trash cans. Now, and this is something that Tesla owners have been requesting for a while, Teslas will be able to not only distinguish between another car and a Tesla, but it will even be able to visualize the exact model and color. Elon Musk, in a tweet, suggests it might become the next punch buggy or yellow car game on the road. Though personally, when I'm on the road, I try to check for all kinds of EVs on the road to just get a better understanding of how common they are, how many there are out there. And I must say, nothing quite beats all the Tesla Model 3s that you see in Silicon Valley. I'm still waiting to see that anywhere else in the world. Tesla licensing its tech? In a tweet, Elon Musk has reiterated that Tesla is open to licensing software and supplying batteries and powertrains. We're just trying to accelerate sustainable energy, not crush competitors. And when asked whether software could mean autopilot, Elon said yes. Now, a lot of people are surprised by this news, but I started the sentence with the word reiterated because Elon has said this at least twice before, and his exact wording seems to show it as well. Here's what Tesla is open for: selling their powertrains, batteries, and other components as is. And here's what Tesla is not open for: making any kind of changes to their powertrains or other components to fit other automakers. Maybe except some tiny, insignificant tweak, but other than that, Tesla is not open for designing things for other companies. And the wording of his tweet seems to show it as well. Hence the exact words: supplying powertrains and batteries, not designing them. I've heard him say this before in an interview, I've heard him say this before on an earnings call, and he has even said something similar once or twice about supercharging, that other companies are also welcome to join the supercharger network if they make a tweak to the charging port, in case of CCS for example, which is needed for communication, if they're willing to pay for their fair share of electricity used by their vehicles, and if they're willing to pay also for their fair share of the network expansion based on their vehicle sales. Though I'm not exactly sure if Elon and Tesla has ever promised to sell autopilot before. But considering that they make their own chips now to make it work, it makes sense as there's less chance of others stealing something, since replicating a system on a chip to work with very specific code is really hard. Ordering some standard chips from Nvidia isn't. And if any automaker accepts Elon's offer on any of this, that would be huge. Although, at this point in time, it would probably be limited to low sales, high value vehicles like luxury vehicles, because A, the price would probably not be affordable for anything else, and B, Tesla just doesn't have that much production to spare at the moment. 100 new fast chargers in Germany. Fast chargers. Tesla has a lot of them with their supercharger network, but for other automakers, it's still a bit rough out there. And in today's news, we learned that in Germany, Aral gas stations will install 100 fast chargers around the country. The fast charger can go up to 350 kilowatt. They're apparently all powered by renewable energy, and there are 4 stalls per charging location. Now, what's unusual about it is that you don't need a subscription. You can use a subscription or as a card or an app like a lot of people do, but what is unusual, you can also just pay with a regular credit card, which is actually, unusual and really great for people that, they might not use fast chargers very often and don't want a subscription. So, in general, this is fantastic news and a great step forward for Germany. But, I was also pleasantly surprised that within the last year, Ionity has really expanded in Germany. There are now around 60 fast chargers, where Tesla has 80 fast chargers. Granted that Tesla has a lot more stalls than Ionity, but this is not bad. Now add another 100 to that, and it's going to be absolutely fantastic. Now, some have compared this to the 2,400 gas stations that Aral has around Germany. But really, this is a really bad comparison because electric vehicles only need fast chargers on long distance trips. And, the range of almost all electric vehicles nowadays is enough for a daily commute, even to another city and back. And, unlike an internal combustion engine, you cannot refuel with gasoline at home. You cannot produce gasoline at home, is better said. You can obviously store it in tanks. So basically it's a bad comparison. And Germany has a goal for 2035 to have 1 million chargers. So all be good, nothing to worry about. Super green skyscraper in Sydney, Australia. So this is some really exciting news, and as the title says, it's about a building being built in Sydney, Australia. And while it may not seem like it at first glance, a huge part of it is essentially built from wood. So what this building has is a steel exoskeleton, and 1 out of every 4 or 5 floors is constructed from something much sturdier, maybe also steel or concrete, but then the floors in between will be made from wood, like its own separate 4-story wooden house. In fact, each of these sections doesn't reach all the way to the exoskeleton and has a park basically blending the indoor and outdoor throughout the entire building. This building at 180 meters high is basically the first of its kind on this scale. The materials, as well as other aspects of the design, decrease the carbon footprint by half and uses half as much energy as a regular skyscraper built in 2020. The building also has integrated solar panels, though personally I have been unable to spot them in any of the renderings. But they do say that the building will only use renewable energy and that part of that energy will be generated not by the building itself. They just didn't specify how much. But a dedicated outdoor park is located through various roof levels, and the illustration appears to show a gym on those levels as well. I must say I love this design. And there are a ton of other details that were in our CleanTechnica article, like the fact that it will be completed in 2025. But these were the most important facts about the story. And if you do want to read the full story, well, the link is in the first comment down below. ITER enters next phase. ITER, the world's biggest tokamak fusion reactor. The building has been under construction for 7 years now. And the project has finally entered the next phase, assembly of the reactor, something that's going to take till 2025. At which point it will be powered on and the first plasma created to test the system. But at that stage it will still not be able to produce more electricity than it consumes. So after the test, they will shut it down and further assembly is required. And for those who didn't know, all the smaller reactors before this were not big enough to and strong enough to create all the plasmas, cool the superconductor, and run the other systems. ITER, however, should finally be able to tip those scales. At a cost of over $20 billion, it's ridiculously expensive. But that is also because a ton of it is research and development. All components are custom order, and some are of ridiculous size. And the plant is designed to be more of a testing facility to see what works and what doesn't. They can basically make adjustments to it. For example, a new study unrelated to ITER actually claims that specific radio waves can be used to stabilize the plasma and prevent a phenomenon called chirping. But those radio emitters still need to be installed. And a more commercial plant will have a much more defined finished blueprint that is easier to construct. And the suppliers will be making the components hopefully either in batches or en masse. I really hope to visit ITER someday. Tesla next generation batteries. Tesla Giga Berlin, a government official in Brandenburg, confirmed that Tesla will in fact be building a battery cell production line there with completely new technology, and that the cells will not be bigger but smaller. They'll be more dense and result in more range. Now, let's examine that claim from a technological standpoint with our knowledge of battery technology. The reason Tesla used cylindrical cells in the first place was because they are cheaper to produce, easier to cool in a battery pack, and industry standard technology can be used to make them. Because there are so many cells, none are taxed a lot during use, leading to longer lasting packs and can provide more power needed for acceleration and higher speeds. Though integrating them in a battery pack, designing that from a technological and engineering standpoint is a lot more difficult, and you get less battery density than prismatic batteries. However, on all those specs, the exact opposite is true for prismatic cells. So the line of thought of most people was like, the more compressed dry cell technology as well as a tabless electrode allow for larger cells without compromising cooling. So that must be what Tesla is going to be doing, or so a lot of people thought. Now let's examine the idea of both larger and smaller cells and see what the differences are. Well, for smaller cells, they would last even longer, very much in line with the million-mile battery. Though, due to the technological improvements, larger cells might also last at least as much as current cells, maybe also a million miles. We don't know how much the technology has improved, but the fact that many smaller ones will last longer than bigger ones is a fact. Smaller cells are even easier to cool. The bigger the radius of the cell, the harder it is to cool the center of it. So while the bigger batteries with a tabless electrode might be as easy to cool as current generation cells, smaller cells are easier to cool. Smaller cells would leave less gaps, less empty space, especially when trying to fill the pack of a Model Y or Model 3, where the pack is of a predetermined size, basically an unalterable size. And they can provide more power at once because there are more of them, which could explain the Roadster's insane acceleration. However, when it comes to total factory output in gigawatt hour, larger cells could allow Tesla to produce more and get to 2 terawatt hours faster, and is most likely going to be cheaper, which are two things that are highly related to one another. So the question is, what does Tesla care more about? Longer range and maybe cheaper to build batteries, or longer lasting batteries with which you can accelerate faster? It's a bit hard to tell because on one side, Elon has said that he wants the million-mile drivetrain and that EVs now have sufficient range. But on the other hand, when you look at the Cybertruck, it will have up to 500 miles of range, and the Roadster will have 620 miles of range. And with smaller batteries but improved technology, they could still be more dense than current batteries. There's just not enough information to know how much the new technological improvements tip the scale in either one direction or the other. Now, here's something that I was actually planning to keep for the battery video, but at this point, I don't know when I'll be able to get to it, so here goes. If Tesla does choose to go for a bigger cell, they'll again probably look for industry standard sizes larger than that. And so because of some very extensive research at CleanTechnica we've done in the past years, there are two specific sizes that very likely Tesla would choose, and those are 26,650 and 32,700. Because those are also industry standard, made by others, have standard equipment that they could order and take advantage of. Now, some people have speculated of a width wider than 40, but that's just extreme. That is very unlikely to actually happen. Panasonic denser cobalt-free batteries. Continuing with battery news, Panasonic has published some really interesting information. They claim that the 2170 cells that they are manufacturing for Tesla will have 20% more energy density in 5 years, and in 2 to 3 years will be able to manufacture batteries without cobalt. Now, half of this news is not very surprising. Tesla, they keep iterating on their chemical formula, improving it, and this year alone, they improved it by 5%, a change that has actually allowed LG Chem to catch up to Panasonic. Which is good for Giga Shanghai, but it seems the only reason that they caught up because Panasonic was too busy ramping production to switch to the new formula. But really, 20% over 5 years is actually a very reasonable number. With yearly improvements, it's probably a range somewhere between 15 and 25%. Although with the new technology that Tesla might be unveiling on Battery Day, it could actually be more than that. But the real exciting part here, and the really newsworthy part, is that Panasonic claims they'll be able to produce cobalt-free batteries. And the only way that is possible, again, keeping in mind chemical formulas and such, is if Tesla starts either selling or renting manufacturing equipment that they made to Panasonic. Quite likely the Maxwell dry cell technology, because something needs to compensate for that stabilizing effect that cobalt has on the battery. And while with a much less denser battery and a really good chemical formula, you could also go cobalt-free. In the case of Tesla, dry cell technology for Maxwell is really the only option. And if they're going to be giving this equipment away or renting or selling it to other battery manufacturers or partners, including Panasonic, but not limited to them, that would be huge. Sony Vision-S, more than a concept. So a little while back, CES 2020 actually, Sony unveiled their Vision-S electric vehicle prototype. At the time, the company said that they only made it to demonstrate to other automakers what for awesome technologies Sony could provide them with, like beautiful displays, including rear and side mirror camera technology, fantastic audio, including dedicated speakers in every headrest. I mean, I have never seen this many speakers before in a car. A huge number of sensors also for autonomy, including 11 cameras, 5 radars, 12 ultrasonic sensors, and even 3 solid-state lidars. That was just on the outside, because it also has sensors on the inside to detect who sat down to drive and automatically adjust all the settings to match the user, as well as keep an eye on them during self-driving profiles to make sure that the driver is paying attention. Now, however, it appears that Sony will be testing the vehicle on the roads of Tokyo. They released a teaser of the vehicle showing it arriving and driving in a parking garage, but the description of the video says the following: Vision-S prototype has arrived in Tokyo for advancing our sensing and audio technologies. The prototype vehicle is also currently under development for public road testing this fiscal year. This may indicate that Sony is exploring the possibility of actually selling this vehicle, and in my opinion, it makes a ton of sense. In the future, cars, they're going to be more computer than car. And Sony, they were actually one of the first ones to actually use lithium-ion batteries in their product, and they still make them. They make some of the best sensors and speakers on the market. They make their own processors even. In some ways, they could vertically integrate more than Tesla even. When you look at this platform with a nice Sony logo on it, I just get the feeling that the electric vehicle market could really be something for an electronics company like Sony. Now, at the moment, Japanese automakers are very set upon hydrogen fuels, but that really is a non-starter for an electronics company. An EV, on the other hand, is definitely within their grasp, and they could differentiate by offering the people what they want rather what the Japanese automakers think people should want, because it keeps them dependent on them. Skoda Enyaq IV Interior Illustrated. Skoda this week decided to tease us a little with the interior of the Skoda Enyaq IV. So we'll get back to that image in just a second, but just a quick reminder. So far, we have seen the camouflage exterior. We know it's based on the MEB platform, like the ID.3 and the Seat El Cupra, but also has all-wheel drive options. So naturally, we assume the interior to be somewhat similar to the ID.3 and Seat El Cupra that are, in most regards, almost identical. The Skoda Enyaq IV, however, is going to look much different if these renderings are anything to go by. That screen, while a bit on the wide side for movies, does appear to be as wide as the one found in the Model 3. But appearances may be deceiving here. What you're looking at now is the interior of the Skoda Octavia 2020. The interior in many ways looks very similar. I am guessing the screen won't be as thin as in these renderings. Again, going by the Skoda Octavia here. It's not a great image, but you can see in the right corner here that it's definitely not thin. In any case, besides the ID.3 and El Cupra, it's nice to have more options. Understanding soil sequestration. So remember how 2 or 3 weeks ago we talked about a new way for capturing carbon by spreading rock dust on farmland because that will help the soil absorb CO2. That is on a big scale something that will help, but it seems that in general soil and soil respiration with all of its microorganisms and various different types of carbon is actually very poorly understood. Now this news story is about a study, and here is a quote from it. Even if soil microorganisms have a full smorgasbord in front of them, they don't know what to eat if there is very little of each type of carbon. And although there is plenty of carbon, microorganisms starve, especially if they have to adjust to ever-changing conditions in a crazy maze. Now what they're hoping to do with more advanced modeling methods is to allow soil scientists, which is a thing apparently, to come up with better soil management methods that will allow us to reduce atmospheric CO2, make soil more efficient, and just get a better understanding of soil sequestration. Now, where I really started paying attention to this study is when they mentioned that the results of it is going to be reflected upon in the next IPCC report that focuses on drawing down atmospheric carbon. So important study, that's for sure. Carbon capture from power plants. A ridiculous carbon capture story. That is what this is. Research done at UC Berkeley, funded by none other than ExxonMobil. Who's surprised there? In any case, they seem to have made a big advance in order to capture CO2 better from power plants. Now, they say that this has 6 times greater potential to capture CO2, but what that exactly means, well... So, we know that the new technique captures 90% of CO2. The study doesn't specify how much the older amine-based technology captures, but from research, I got a range of 73 to 96, though don't know how accurate that is. We do know that the old way uses 30% of the energy the plant generates, and that the new technique uses up less. But again, we don't know how much, but since it is the main point of the story, my guess would be a significant decrease. Maybe that's where that 6 times greater capacity comes in. Here is a quote by a senior researcher at UC Berkeley. For CO2 capture, steam stripping, where you use direct contact with steam to take off CO2, has been a sort of holy grail for the field. It is rightly seen as the cheapest way to do it. And these materials, at least from experiments we have done so far, look very promising. The CO2 would then be sequestered into rock or pumped back under the ground. Now, here is a quote that really struck a nerve for me. In reality, of the kinds of things that the International Panel on Climate Change says we need to do to control global warming, CO2 capture is a huge part. And we don't have a use for most of the CO2 that we need to stop emitting, but we have to do it. Yeah, carbon capture is a big part, when capturing it from the atmosphere, not from the sources of pollution that we should be shutting down. Even if these power plants become not 90% but 100% efficient at capturing CO2, the delivery method, as well as the drilling and mining, aren't. The whole thing should be shut down, not circumnavigated through loopholes. New Gigafactories in the UK and France. Now I'm going to open this story by saying that in my opinion something smells a bit fishy here, but it seems that the UK is getting its own Gigafactory by a new company called British Volt. The plant will be 30 gigawatt hours and powered by 200 megawatt hours of solar energy, and it will be located in South Wales. It will be producing both cylindrical and pouch type batteries. But here's the strange thing. Usually we don't see a lot of new battery manufacturers because the research and development required is enormous everywhere from the product to the manufacturing. Northvolt, being new to the game, started on a much smaller scale. And they were upfront about needing 6 billion, not 1.5. And we have heard a ton about them throughout the years. They have done an enormous amount of research and development. And from the very beginning, they announced major partners. Yet British Volt, which sounds kind of strange now that I mentioned Northvolt, they apparently came from thin air. And They are starting already a construction of their factory in 2021, and they claim to start production of batteries in 2023, where Northvolt, it took them to get from startup to actual Gigafactory 4 years if they actually manage to start production in 2020. Now, apparently Britishvolt has already signed some kind of agreements with the UK government, but I would still err on the side of caution here. Now, there's also a very similar story actually coming out of France, where a company named Vercor wants to make a 16 to 50 gigawatt hour gigafactory starting production in 2023 as well. But they at least have partnered with large existing companies like Schneider Electric. They have an illustration of their factory and a website that actually loads normally, unlike Britishvolt's site that you're seeing here. Though both still look pretty cheap when you compare it to Northvolt's site that looked great from the very beginning. The following goes for both projects. If you need more than $1 billion for a project and need investors for it, you can definitely afford to have a good-looking website. Seriously. Volkswagen ID.1 And ID.2. So it seems that the head of Volkswagen's brand has been sharing the company's plans on their lower budget vehicles. There will be a Peugeot E208 and Renault Zoe competitor, the ID.2, and an even smaller vehicle like the E-Up called the ID.1. Both are based on the MEB platform, though the one for the ID.1 might be a miniaturized version of the MEB platform. The ID.1, codenamed the E-Zitty, will have actually two battery formats, a 24 kilowatt hour battery and a 36 kilowatt hour battery, and the latter will enable the vehicle to have 300 kilometers of range. Now, something else interesting that they mentioned is that any MEB platform vehicle costs 40% less to build. So whether they were talking about the E-Up here or not, and whether it would also get a 40% discount is unknown, but if they would, the vehicle would cost something like 13,000 euros in Germany, and that is without the incentive. Now, of course, by the time this vehicle is released in 2025, the German incentive will be a lot smaller or maybe even non-existent. But if for that price, the vehicle is released in Germany right now, it would qualify for a 9,000 euro incentive. In which case, the price of the vehicle overall would be just a little under 4,000 euros. And just the thought of that is, pretty hilarious. Now, one thing that I gotta mention, however, is that 13,000 euro price, right? So before the whole ID program, they actually were planning to make a budget EV together with Suzuki for approximately this price, something that fell through the roof. But the fact that they were planning to make such a budget vehicle for that price indicates that, a budget EV might actually cost that much someday, soon, in the next couple of years. Especially if they're going to come up with their brilliant ways of cheating costs. Like how the E-Up uses your smartphone as a center console, making room for a tablet, and you got yourself a Model 3 or at least an ID.3. Volkswagen and Wangxiang A123. So one of the first companies in the lithium-ion battery scene was called A123. It eventually went bankrupt, and half of it was sold to Lithium Works, a Dutch company, and the other half was sold to Wangxiang A123. Now, there's a huge history about this all, and you can read more about that in our CleanTechnica article, link in the first comment down below. But in today's news, it was announced that Volkswagen made a $1.4 billion deal with Wangxiang A123 for an undisclosed amount of lithium-ion batteries of one sort or another. Now, this already makes it the 7th battery maker that Volkswagen has made a deal with across 3 different continents. This is one of the reasons why CleanTechnica has started to take Volkswagen's electrification plans a lot more seriously. Solar panels in Switzerland. So this is a slightly funny story, but a company in Switzerland is planning to offer solar panels that only appear when there is actually sun to be absorbed. Looking at their video, you might think, damn, that looks cool and futuristic, which it does. But when you start thinking about it, what are the advantages? I mean, solar panels still produce energy when it's cloudy. I mean, if you park your car there and it's raining, you don't want your roof to abandon you to the elements. Well, I suppose in a desert, it could protect the panels from a sandstorm, or maybe if there's a lot of snow on top of them, this can automatically throw some of the snow off. But really, there doesn't seem to be any clear advantage as to why you would want to do this, because the reason why solar panels don't have something like a car's windshield wiper is because the additional costs for such a system just don't justify it compared to, occasional cleaning. And the only advantage I can think of is
at night, if you are sleeping in a Tesla looking at the stars there, I guess it's nice to not have to look at a roof. But I mean, you wouldn't park it there anyway, so really, who knows what the advantages are.
European plug-in sales. Thanks to some great work done by the European Alternative Fuels Observatory, CleanTechnica managed to put together two pretty interesting graphs. One with the top 6 European countries by plug-in sales, with sales above 10%, with Norway leading, following by Iceland, Sweden, Finland, Netherlands, and then Portugal. Then in the second graph, we have the top 10 European countries under 10%. For those wondering, China is at 4.7% and the US is at 1.9%. But what is interesting about this graph is that the growth is pretty steep for some of these countries, and I bet that the above graph from earlier will look a lot different same time next year. Tesla Model Y rear-wheel drive. So the Model Y rear-wheel drive version was briefly online for $48,000, which is strange considering that that is only $2,000 less than the all-wheel drive version, and Elon actually hinted that the price would be $45,000. But it has already been removed from the store, so it was probably an accident, but it could indicate that the Model Y rear-wheel drive version is coming sometime soon. And that was it for this week's news show. Now, as you know, we have a new Patreon page, make sure to check that out. If you liked this video, share it with your friends that care about clean tech, and if you give this video a thumbs up, that would also really help us along. Now, everything that we cover in the news show, we try to also write articles about, and sometimes in much greater depth than we can go into in the weekly news show. And the links to those can be found in the first comment down below. Now, other than that, I wish you guys a wonderful weekend. Till next time, see ya.